Welcome, everyone. ISACA Vancouver Chapter's SheLeadsTech team is very pleased to be back on the air with our popular SheLeadsTech podcast series. This is our very first episode of 2024-2025 Breaking Barriers series, and episode 1 features our past and present ISACA Vancouver female presidents. First, a bit about ISACA SheLeadsTech. The SheLeadsTech Global Program aims to increase the representation of women across the digital trust workforce and elevate more female leaders in technology. Why? Because there's a gender imbalance, and per recent studies, that imbalance is even worse in technology. To improve that, our SheLeadsTech program at ISACA Vancouver engages women and men to help develop, empower, and advance women in technology-related careers through engaging events, and this, our podcast series, a platform for fun, honest discussion to learn from people's experiences and help grow our next generation of female leaders. Thanks for tuning in. Let's start. It's difficult for women to break barriers in tech leadership, but doing that at work and in your industry association, that takes an amazing person. Luckily for us, we're sitting here with 3 amazing ISACA Vancouver female presidents who are leaders and trailblazers in the tech profession. Let's share stories, find out what drives these leaders, and gain insights from their experiences. Please welcome from ISACA Vancouver Chapter, current president, Mary Carmichael, past president, Katie Szetelnicka, and immediate past president, Rosalind Tan. Thank you for joining me today. To start, I'd like to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and address my very first question. With work and life being incredibly busy and challenging, why take on the additional role of ISACA Vancouver president? Mary, let's start with you.
Oh, thanks, Marlene. That's a very big question. So my name is Mary Carmichael, and I don't come from a traditional cybersecurity background. I am a CPA. However, I found with my CPA career, I was always involved in financial systems implementations and upgrades. So when you are supporting a financial system that does billing, invoicing, procurement, budgeting, as well as the financial reporting, there is a significant amount of information security requirements involved, as well as meeting regulations such as PCI for credit card processing. So that was my route into cybersecurity, was this part of my job. So when you're an accountant, you are responsible for the accuracy, completeness of your financial statements, and that is really dependent on your financial system in terms of its security model, who has access to what, and also doing auditing and testing to make sure that the information being entered into the system is correct and accurate. So that's how I started with cybersecurity. This is once again my role in financial services. So as for taking on that the big role as president, I think it's a good opportunity to provide leadership and vision to the chapter. So Vancouver is a very active hotspot when it comes to cybersecurity. So we are hosting one of the world's largest conferences next year on Web Summit in May. So this is an opportunity for our chapter to support even the tech ecosystem in Vancouver and through our services, whether it's programming, mentorship, and also our certifications. So we have a great or a fantastic opportunity to promote BC and also our tech hub in Vancouver. And also, I think another aspect I like about being the president or taking that role is really goes back to community building and engagement. I really enjoy our networking events. And even yesterday, I was at an event with the Security Management Conference for physical security, and they asked for ISACA to be present there because they wanted to learn a bit more about cybersecurity and how does cybersecurity impact their role as physical security professionals. So it's great to engage with other like-minded members of the community because at the end of the day, we all have a common goal. We want to protect our organizations from threats. And those threats don't matter whether they're digital or physical. And also the last aspect I like about the job is just the advocacy. So working with other groups, presenting at global conferences, and also having the opportunity to work with government to once again to promote cybersecurity as a profession, how we can strengthen the community here through grants, and also even the cyber legislation, how we can provide a voice to make sure the legislation being put forward is realistic, addresses the root cause, the problems at hand, as well as being implementable. So, being a president really pushes my skill set in terms of communication, strategic leadership, but also bringing together a team. We have over 70 volunteers, and how do we use those 70 volunteers to promote the mandate of our chapter? So, it's a big role. So, it's definitely not what do you call a figurehead role. So, we're here to make a difference.
Absolutely. And, as the current president, you're definitely making a difference. Katie, how about yourself?
Okay, hi, my name's Katie. I work at KPMG in the Technology Risk Services practice. I specialize in IT audit and assurance. I mostly do SOC 2 assurance engagements and ISO certifications. I started volunteering for ISACA back in 2018. I was volunteering as co-chair of BC Aware 2019, supporting Kimberly St. Pierre. She was amazing to work with. And then in 2019, I took over as chair of BC Aware 2020. I was inspired and impressed by how passionate, hardworking, and committed our volunteers were. So when an opportunity came up to take on the president role, I was more than happy to do that.
Great. Thank you for doing that. Ross, over to you.
Hey everyone, my name is Ross. I work for the business transformation team at Technical Safety BC, and I'm currently a student at SFU as well, pursuing my master's. I took on the role of president 5 years into my volunteer journey with the chapter because I wanted to make a larger impact within the local technology industry. I started out as a SheLeadsTech volunteer, and I really admired the mindset of the people around me because it exposed me to an environment that's filled with like shared struggles and successes. And at that time, I was working as a cybersecurity analyst where I experienced plenty of alienating moments given the homogenous population of that field. But SheLeadsTech and the rest of the ISACA Vancouver chapter were just different. So they walk the talk in embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it inspired me to want to contribute my time and energy in perpetuating that positivity, not just within the chapter, but for the rest of the industry through collaborative initiatives. So when the opportunity came up, I went for it.
We're ever so grateful for that. Awesome. All right, so those are our three presidents. Let's get into some questions. Ross, I'm going to start with you. In terms of innovation and culture, how are female leaders in tech driving innovation in ways that might differ from their male counterparts? Specifically, what unique strengths do women bring to innovation process?
I'm going to answer this in two parts. Like the first is just through mere representation, as in normalizing the idea of a female leader and possibly eliminating the need to qualify the role with female and just call it leader in the future. Because I don't believe, I've shared this with Mary, but last term, when I was president and you were vice president, I've had someone ask me if I was worried about the optics of the chapter, that we're going to have two female presidents in consecutive terms. So I approached the situation with curiosity by asking them if they would ever ask that question if it was switched, like there was going to be two male presidents in consecutive terms. So they laughed nervously and stuttered through their way out of the grave they dug. That was the first part. But the second part, going to your actual question about ways female leaders in tech might drive innovation differently from male counterparts, I would say it's simply bringing a unique set of experience into their strategy and approach, because it can help breed creativity in unconventional ways. From what I've observed in my own social circle, at least, females tend to experience more friction going into tech than males or going into leadership roles as well. And I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of us do. So for
Yeah.
instance, when I was working as a cybersecurity analyst, that was a technical hands-on role. Yeah, I would get on a call with a male project manager, and the client would automatically assume that the PM was the technical representative in the call. And I don't believe male analysts experience that as much, if not at all. And all my life has just been different iterations of that similar experience. Like all the way back to elementary school, I remember that when I was in the 4th grade, they gave us a choice to pick one practical life skill type class per semester. And it was either a computer class where you would learn how to assemble your own computer, like your own tower, or you take kind of like home economics where you would learn how to sew and knit. So when I told my parents I wanted to do the computer class, they asked me several times if I was sure. Where would I use that kind of skill? Wouldn't I prefer to be in another class, like with other female students? And I feel that someone who has overcome those kind of hurdles, like discouragements or flat out refusals to reach a position of leadership in a gender imbalanced industry, they can offer unparalleled resilience, creative strategies, and compassion towards the hurdles of achieving innovation. Because it isn't easy to be innovative. Anyone can create something, but only innovators get the credit. So that's my answer.
That's a great answer. And I loved your story that you started with on how you approached it. And I think a lot of us would be kind of taken aback. And I loved how you just took it as, let me just be curious about this. And I love that strategy. Next question, and this one's for you, Katie. How can companies address unconscious bias in recruitment, promotions, and leadership opportunities?
Okay, there are a number of different ways it can be done. So one of them, and probably the most popular one, would be delivering training, teaching your employees how to recognize your biases and what to do in order to mitigate them. Also, I think having diverse hiring panels, that's a great idea, because when you have people coming from different backgrounds and different experiences, it will definitely provide you with a variety of different perspectives. I think another way of doing it would be structuring your interviews to make sure that they're fair and that everybody gets asked the same questions in the same order and that they're evaluated against the same criteria. In terms of, in addition to it, I think one more thing that I've been seeing more and more of is blind recruiting, which means removing a lot of information that could potentially be bias triggering, such as name, gender, origin of the person, ethnicity, etc., from resumes during the resume review process. That could be one of the things that companies could do more of as well. And in terms of promotion and leadership roles, I think having clarity around what do you need to do in order to get promoted, and holding everybody against the same criteria and evaluating them against the same criteria and standards. And in addition to it, I think for underrepresented minorities, it would be a great idea to have mentorship or sponsorship programs in place.
Oh, that's great. Those are wonderful suggestions that companies can take. Because if we're going to get the innovation, we are definitely going to have some good hiring policies in order to bring those people in. And then to keep them there, we need some appropriate policies in the company to ensure things are fair. So Mary, a question for you. How can tech companies create more inclusive and supportive environments that encourage women to stay and grow in their careers?
So I guess for this question, let's go back to Ross's example with that individual maybe expressing concern about having 2 back-to-back female presidents. So I know the approach was to, would you ask that question, but then about to a man? But then my question is, what triggered that question to begin with? And does that involve labeling and unconscious bias? So is there a perception that if you have 2 back-to-back women, is it assumed that we're non-technical? So it kind of goes back to I guess why that concern was raised and how that relates to maybe a bias. And with that bias, how does it lead to a label? And I think that's where we need to discuss DEI training. So with the DEI training, it goes back to unconscious bias, what labels we have for people and why do we have those labels and how that influences the way we treat women or other underrepresented groups. And I think through that labeling, you start questioning, like, why do I think that way? So when the SACA Vancouver chapter completed DEI training last year, one of the examples was women, pregnant women, as well as women that have young children. So there's an assumption like, oh, you're too busy to take on this work task. I'll do it for you. But really, that's a bias. And you're also labeling women that have young children or attending to children as being unavailable to work. So part of that's having a conversation, saying, how can we support you? How's your time to work on this task? But at the end of the day, you don't make conclusions or judgments without having a conversation and being open to having that conversation. So I think as for women in tech companies, really goes back to understanding what are the systemic issues at play and how our everyday workplace culture creates that more inclusive, supportive environment. So we have, of course, training in terms of questioning our unconscious bias, but also how do we recruit and hire, especially in terms of resumes. So there has been research in terms of women resumes. Let's say I have Mary Carmichael versus a Mark Carmichael. The Mark Carmichael, even with the same experience as me, will get more callbacks than versus a Mary Carmichael, and that has been proven. So that goes back to having more blind resume reviews, but also questioning if it's a female, is there unconscious bias that, oh, maybe she's more soft skills focused, more communication, maybe more less hands-on. But once again, understanding what's the bias at play and how do you mitigate that? Also, I would say this understanding of having flexible work arrangements. So I think during the pandemic, a lot of women left their roles at tech because of some of the inflexibility. So how can we make work arrangements more open to women, especially in terms of remote work options, as well as having parental leave policies? And also just going back to the supportive workplace culture, how can we foster an environment where all employees feel safe and valued? And this is where we need to have zero tolerance for discrimination or harassment. So once again, if there are grievances, at least we're able to talk about that and also address them as well.
I think that's a lot of fair comments. I remember tuning into a podcast with Melinda Gates, and she was talking about how she was supporting and encouraging her husband to be part of the school drop-off, but she was amazed at how unconscious there was a bias there that it was expected that she would do drop-off. But when Bill would do it, it would be this celebration of like, well, look at how he's doing that. And it's like, well, that's a bias. Why would there be expectation that she would obviously be the one? And why is it so shocking when the other person did it? The partner did it. So I think that that's really interesting that you're bringing up, having that conversation about what is causing people to think that way.
And then also something else I want to add is how do women support other women? And I think this was my biggest takeaway from when I worked in financial services to even the technology role. So this is my personal observation. I do find women, I'm going to make a very blunt statement, maybe less supportive of other women in the tech field. And that actually surprised me. So I'm not sure if you have a corporation that promotes tokenism, but you can only have X amount of women in leadership positions in technology. And those positions tend to be more change management or business analysis. So are women competing against other women for a select few spots? Because once again, we can't have women are only deemed to be acceptable in certain positions in technology management. So that's what kind of surprised me in terms of this more competition. But also, when I took the ELCI program in Toronto, one thing was very surprising was you have 30 women in this program and they're all supportive. But also I found with the Toronto tech community, there are so many job opportunities. So I just wasn't sure just in Vancouver if it's a small market, so therefore it's more competitive. And then also you have unconscious bias. So women are only acceptable in certain positions. So I think that's something we need to talk more about is how can women support each other? And also we're not trying to compete with each other. So I'm just not sure. I know there's been research in this area and also a lot of magazines have explored this concept about women not necessarily supporting each other, especially in industries that are male dominated. So we need to take a look at what drives that behavior.
I agree completely. Mary, I don't want to let you go yet. I think you're onto some really good themes here. And so if I can ask, what specific strategies have you used to navigate challenges of being a female leader in a tech company?
I usually tackle them directly. Sorry. So I just found sometimes with the comments, this one's gonna, I was talking to someone else in the tech community, and she's a CPA. So right away, like when I was doing my CISM, which is a cybersecurity designation, I was in an ISACA event, I was saying, oh, I'm studying for my CISM. And the comment I received back is, you don't have any cybersecurity experience. And I remember thinking, what? I was a bit surprised at that. Because I think once again, it goes back to labeling. You're a CPA, maybe you do some business analysis on the side for cybersecurity projects, but that's not the case. So I think once again, just being curious, but also is an opportunity to educate. So when I spoke about the CISM, the cybersecurity designation, it covers risk management, governance, business case, operations, as well as business continuity. So I think part of that is explaining or even opening up the conversation about what cybersecurity is and all the different job opportunities in different domains, whether it's risk management, audit, as well as even like your security operations. So I think part of that is when you have that type of question, respond back. I know there is initial discomfort, but just respond back, use it as an opportunity to educate. But then also at the same time, as I do think once you do that, there is a level of respect. So you're not afraid to voice your opinions, provide examples, but really you have to set the tone. So set your tone in terms of the relationships, the conversations, but also what behaviors you will tolerate.
That's great advice. And I love that personal story that you shared. I also come into my career a bit sideways, and I've encountered that. And I think I wished I'd handled it the way you have. I think that's really admirable. Thanks.
Oh, and just one thing. And also you can write about it. So I did write about, are you technical versus non-technical? And I have received a lot of positive support saying people are, females particularly, are very happy that's being raised because you're in a job interview. They're asking you, are you hands-on? And the question's like, why are they asking that? And even I have a friend who's, 20 years of software development experience. When she gets reference checked, the company always asks her references. Are you sure? Is she really hands-on? Can you confirm that? Can you confirm her level of ability? Even though she has 20 years of experience, plus she has a PhD in software development.
Oh, that's crazy. For our listeners here, we're going to include a link to Mary's article on this very subject so that you can read it. It's fantastic. And thank you for doing that article, Mary. I think it's really groundbreaking and really hits right on the nose, the issue at heart there.
Thank you.
Ross, over to you. What role can men play in supporting women's leadership in tech and being our allies? What action can males take to create a more equitable industry for us?
I want to say speak up. And by that, I don't mean mansplain. If you see opportunities to exercise allyship, do it. No matter how small it is, trust me, it counts. And you'd be surprised by how much bias you can break through your influence. And I'm not going to give an example specifically for leadership, more just like females in general, and this example will sound quite familiar to many women, I think. So when I was in a team where I was the only female, but we all had the same job title, one of the leaders consistently asked me to take meeting minutes. I willingly did it because I was going to take notes anyway for my own benefit, so sharing it was not a big deal. But over time, I realized that I was being treated differently than my male counterparts. So when I finally raised it with my manager, he made excuses on behalf of the leader. Like, I'm sure they didn't mean it like that. They probably knew that you take good notes. You should take it as a compliment. And then I looked back, and what I needed there was for my colleagues to say, hey, I can take notes too, or hey, let's take turns doing it. It shouldn't just be her doing it all the time. Or maybe for my manager to acknowledge that I was not being treated equitably and to try to prevent such instances from recurring. Because when marginalized groups demand equity, they're not asking to be treated uniformly, like exactly the same as everyone. The ask is to build systems that can accommodate varying circumstances. So it is admittedly tough, but it's not impossible. So if I compare my manager's reaction to like a business workflow, his brain was unconsciously wired to preserve the status quo. So for me to demand change, his reaction was to nip it in the bud. Don't be offended, feel complimented. And when that could have been an opportunity to review the equitable practices of the organization and make some improvements there. So I think that's where we're at, where we need the awareness and then you can take action.
And the courage to do so. And just building on what Mary said about, it's an uncomfortable moment, but you have to actually advocate. Not only do women have to advocate and have that uncomfortable moment to actually have that conversation, we need men as allies to also get a little uncomfortable and break the status quo and have that uncomfortable conversation to say, hey, that's not right that you're asking her to do that.
I do want to jump in. So now we have Copilot. So Copilot will take notes for us. So we don't need to deal with that issue anymore. So this is where you have to embrace AI or generative AI. So in terms of notes, to-dos, the follow-ups, yeah, that's now Copilot. Let's assign the work to that if you're interested.
Thank goodness. This is where generative AI is really helping us tremendously. I love it. Lots of good things there. Katie, over to you. I really like this question about specific strategies that people are using. So I'm going to put it to you as well. What specific strategies have you used to navigate challenges of being a female leader in the technology industry?
Thank you. Actually, there are a few that I have been using consistently, and I think they have been working really well for me. One of them was building a strong support network, not only within the organization that I work at, but also at, for example, ISACA. When I joined ISACA, I met a lot of great people. Some of them are my friends, and I really enjoyed, having a lot of mentors from different areas of our business, because we kind of do the same thing, but we all do different things. Some people work in audit, some work in cybersecurity, etc. So it's good to get everybody else's perspective that is always different than yours. So I would say that was probably one of the key things, having a strong support network inside and outside of your organization. The next one would be continuous learning. I think I've been pretty fortunate that I've been giving a lot of opportunities to grow my skill sets in different areas of IT audit and assurance. And I've been pursuing a number of different certifications, some of them also from ISACA. ISACA has a wide range of great certifications for everybody, for people that work in IT audit, IT security. So just take a look at them. I think they're great, and they definitely make you look good, and they look great on your resume, and they will definitely open a lot of opportunities for you. So that would be one of them. And also, I feel like I have also been trying to create safe spaces for people that might be facing discrimination, and providing them with support and guidance on how to deal with situation where they're discriminated against, or they feel like they haven't been treated fairly. So those are the things that I have been doing personally.
Oh, those are great, Katie. I think those are things we can all do. And I agree with you. ISACA, I've felt it as well. It's been my safe place to come to recharge, to gain perspective. And it's always given me a great sounding board on what is going on in the industry and how to move forward in a positive way and make a positive difference. Well, we're getting close to the end of the questions. So I've just got one last question to pose to, and it's the same one for all of you. What advice do you have for young women who are aspiring to leadership roles in tech? And we'll go around the room here. Mary, I'll start with you.
You have to be your own advocate. So if you're assuming someone will notice you, notice your projects or opportunities, that may not be happening. So part of that is promoting yourself, attending events, and you are your own champion. I found with women that's can be a bit uncomfortable because you're like, oh, am I bragging? I should be more humble. But no, you're successful. You should be proud of what you do. Use your LinkedIn. Also, there's lots of speaking opportunities, especially here in Vancouver, to promote your work. So if you're an AI expert, software development, conferences, and also even ISACA Vancouver are always looking for speakers. So I think take the risk, go outside your comfort zone, and just promote your work and also believe in yourself. And I do find from a personal perspective, like even networking 10 years ago versus now, it has changed. So I found even yesterday when I'm attending a physical security conference, I was acknowledged, I was accepted, and people really enjoyed the keynote. So I had a distinct viewpoint on cybersecurity and physical security, and it was resonated with the audience. So once again, take a risk, and if it doesn't work out, that's okay. There's going to be another opportunity. I think another thing we have to learn is resilience, be able to bounce back. Some things may not work your way, but that's okay. There's going to be another opportunity. So keep the ball bouncing and just have faith in yourself, watch Oprah episodes, and also have a good network that supports you.
Great advice. We always talk about resilience with respect to business and cybersecurity, but we have to also apply it to ourselves. And I think that's great. And self-advocating. You're right. I think a lot of us feel like, oh, I can't do that, but you have to. You have to be your own champion. Great advice, Mary. Katie, over to you.
I would say what I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago. I think having a group of people that support you, having a network, someone that can provide you with mentorship and advice, that's probably really important, and it has worked for me in my career. And also, everybody has their unique strengths and skills, so make sure that you identify those and leverage them to your advantage. And never stop learning, because we're in a field where everything changes and there's just everything evolves really fast. So make sure that you stay on top of all that new information and find time to learn new things. That would be my advice.
That's great advice. And you're right, things are changing all the time. Mary mentioned generative AI, and it's now taking, Copilot is taking notes for us, so if you can keep up on top of this, then you can actually find ways and tricks to make life easier and better for yourself. Absolutely. Ross, over to you.
I want to build on what Katie said about never stop learning, because having that under your belt will also help you with confidence. So I'm just going to do a shameless plug here. ISACA Vancouver Chapter is hosting the very first CISM mock exam on November 16th. So if you're interested in joining that, please go to our website to see the details or follow us on LinkedIn. But really, the advice I have for young women who are aspiring to leadership roles in tech is tech and leadership, just like the color pink, are inherently gender neutral. Yet centuries of damage have led them to become gender tagged. So it's going to be tough and slow, but don't be discouraged. Pursue them. Don't let the legacy of females and allies who have worked hard to get us to a 4:1 ratio. That's the latest ratio I read, like male versus female in the industry. Don't let their efforts go in vain, right? Like women, just like every single human being, can belong in tech and positions of leadership. So do it.
Great advice, Ross. I like the fact that you did the plug-in for our event on November 16th. I'm also going to just do a quick plug. We've talked about mentorship quite a bit, and ISACA Vancouver Chapter has a very strong mentorship program. So please reach out to us on that. And if you liked this podcast series and you liked what we were talking about today, we plan to release one each month. On top of that, if you like the idea of networking, and I know we've talked about networking, we have an upcoming SheLeadsTech networking opportunity on November 14th. So we'll be marketing that on LinkedIn and other places shortly as well. So we look forward to having you join us that way. Thank you all so much for taking the time out of your calendar to meet with me and with our listeners today. You've all been breaking some barriers in the industry, and I think providing such great leadership examples as presidents of ISACA Vancouver Chapter. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for your leadership, for your volunteerism, and look forward to hopefully networking and speaking with you in the future again. Thanks so much today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're still listening, I am so pleased to let you know that we have some bonus material. Again, my name is Marleen Mavrow, and I am the director for SheLeadsTech. And with me today, I also have Erica Pretorius. She is our past president of ISACA Vancouver Chapter, and I'm delighted that we have the opportunity to also speak with her. Welcome, Erica.
Thanks so much for having me.
So it's difficult for women to break barriers. You've done this in your career at work, but then on top of that, you've also done this in industry by being a president of ISACA Vancouver Chapter. You've joined a great group of individuals who've been trailblazers, but I'd like to speak with you a little bit more, find out a bit about you, and then maybe you can tell our listeners, why on earth did you take on the role of ISACA Vancouver president?
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here and going down this path of actually reminiscing past my past career and so on. I'm just a little bit for context for the listeners. I'm a partner at Deloitte. I've been with the firm 20 years. I've been in the industry about 25 years. And ISACA really came around and came to my consciousness when I came to Vancouver. And I didn't know anybody, and I really wanted to get a sense of what's happening in the community, connect with like-minded individuals. So the team I was working with at the time took me along to some ISACA events. And I just loved it. It's so great to hang out with people that are interested in the same things you do, that get excited about the same things you do. So it's been a lovely community to be part of for over 20 years now. I started off my kind of connection with ISACA first by attending events, as I said, and then I started working on committees. Because I love events, I love bringing people together. So I started off as the events committee. I then played a role in a couple other ones. And then I got asked if I wanted to be the president. And that was probably 15 years or so ago. And it was such a vote of confidence. I think that for me was a big thing of like, wow, there's all these people that I've been connecting with that I see as peers or mentors. Kind of had that vote of confidence in me to put me up for this position. What was interesting during my term, though, which I don't think anybody else necessarily had to go through, is I actually had to go on mat leave while I was pregnant for a few months.
Wow.
So if it doesn't rain, it pours. So I had a lot of responsibility all of a sudden. But it was also great. I had a great vice president, Eric Berg, at that time, and he stepped in for about 2 months where I was just kind of getting my bearings and catching up on sleep with a new baby. And then I was able to resume my duties as president, luckily, because I could take off the time off work, so I could focus on just ISACA being my professional commitment during that time.
Wow, that's most people look at as taking on the president role as a bit of another job, but you really were managing 3 jobs. That's insane. Wow, you are truly a trailblazer and an example of multitasking. But did you find that difficult sometimes where you were, thinking about your work, but also the volunteering, and then at the same time, you would hear your baby cry and you're like, but I just want to get an email out. And that must have been quite a balancing act to perform.
Yeah, I think it definitely was. Like I'm a pretty natural multitasker, so part of it was like, okay, I knew I had signed up for something here. I did not want to let the chapter down by not providing kind of the level of commitment that I'd aspired to. I think luckily because I was off mat leave of work,
Yeah.
I had either the baby or my chapter responsibilities, or I had kind of work and my chapter responsibilities. By the time I went back to work, my term was finished. So then I could hand over to the next president and just then play that past president role. But yeah, it's certainly, and I think that's probably like I had those things to balance at that time, but it's not unlike most women need to balance that now in their careers. Like when you're taking on different roles, everybody has their family and their job. So it was a bit of a push, but I know there's lots of other females that have done similar type of things and thrived. I think the one way I managed to balance it a little bit is having great committees and really relying on the committees to take on and complete their assigned responsibilities. Sometimes as a president, you step in, it's like, oh, I'll just help this out. Like I didn't have that luxury. And I think having that other, like that commitment to my family saying, well, if I take this on now, I won't be able to spend time with my new baby or so on. That made that decision a little bit easier, which sometimes I think
Right.
is hard for women. It's like, well, it's not like I'm going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix if I don't do this, which then it's harder to say, oh, I should just step in. But having that kind of clear line of like, I know what I'm giving up, or saying no to by saying yes to something else, that helped. And then we were just very diligent in like making our meetings very action oriented. Like one of our biggest accomplishments during that time was actually getting our bylaws approved, because by that time the chapter had been operating for a few years without approved bylaws. So we had to kind of go through, well, what's the changes we want to make. There was changes to the voting structure and the voting requirements we wanted to make and so on, to allow a little bit more flexibility. So there was very important things that we wanted to do. So that was my main focus, getting those done. And then obviously the events. And then there were some things that you just realize, well, that may not actually happen during this term, and we'll leave some good notes for the next president to take those activities on.
Wow, that's great that you were able to have something to wrap your hands around and really deliver. I think that really helps when you're trying to do some balancing and yeah, provides clear focus. That's also a really good lead into my next question. From your perspective, how has the landscape for women in tech changed since you were president? What still needs to change?
Yeah, such a good topic to touch on. I think the investments that the country, the ecosystem, the education system has made in getting women into STEM courses, I think we're really starting to see that now, because there was a real big push. I want to say like 5, 6, 7 years ago it started. And those women are now, they've graduated, they're in the workforce, they're founders of companies. At Deloitte, we've launched a program of Women in Tech that's associated with our Technology Fast 50 program. And we just recently had an event, and the room was full of female founders and female executives in tech. And I don't think 5 years ago we necessarily would have got there. We may have been able to fill the room, but we wouldn't have had that percentage of founders in the room. And yesterday was just like, when they asked the question, half the people put their hands up, which I think has been phenomenal. So having that female-led companies, that is really going to, I think, accelerate even the changes we've seen so far. Because it's one thing to have females in the room, but it's very different to actually have them in leadership positions. And then I think the one piece I always tie into, because like promoting females are great, but I think for me it's promoting that diversity of thought. So if you have females in the room, generally it just creates a different dialogue. So when you have either people from different genders or people even from different diverse ethnic backgrounds and so on in a room, then it creates a better voice because you're creating a more collaborative environment. So all of those things I think has been just amazing to see in kind of the BC ecosystem.
That warms my heart hearing that, you had that room full of not just females, but the leadership. And I think that is an important part of it. So what still needs to change, do you think?
Always what
That's a
needs to
toughie.
change? Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one because I think there's structural things. There's also just maybe mindset and so on. We need to look at. I think that there's still a bit of a disparity between funding for female entrepreneurs versus male. The way venture capitalists or private equity may look at the risk profile of founders. Like, I don't want to grossly generalize, but in general, women are seen as less risk taking. Where if you're looking for the kind of that high percentage growth, you may go with the individual that shows up in the room and has really bold visions, and they may without necessarily a lot of substance. Where if you're showing up with a more diverse personality or skill set or background, there might be different risk tolerances, and there's building businesses that are sustainable. It's probably you're going to see a little bit more on that on the slightly more risk averse side. So I think just that, like understanding, and we need a little bit of track record. We need some of these female founders I just talked about to have successful businesses, to have successful exits, and to show that you may not have this kind of stereotypical what you think a founder might look like. You don't need somebody like that to have a successful business. So I think it's a little bit of that time, and then just a continuous kind of challenging the stereotypes we might have or so on. So funding, I think, is a big one. I think in a corporate organizations, just continuing to make sure we have diverse leadership that can make sure all the voices in the room get heard. That I think should be a continued focus for all organizations.
I agree completely. I think that as a female myself, walking into a room, I found that my voice was almost discarded. And so I think respecting people as individuals and looking at them as individuals so that each and every one are judged on their merit as opposed to seeing it coming from a male versus a female is really important. So, and very good points about the venture capitalism and the funding side. I hadn't thought about that, but you know what? You're right. It must be a really different and at times challenging aspect for females who are trying to get a new business off the ground to be taken and looked at in the same light. So really good points, Erica. And I think those are, for anyone who's listening and has the ability to provide venture capitalism, to maybe step back and explore their own bias, whether hidden or not, and maybe give it an extra thought.
Absolutely.
So you definitely are a leader in what you're doing. You've definitely gone through some years and a journey. Based on that, could you share a pivotal moment or a challenge that you faced in your career and how you overcame it to become a leader in the tech industry?
Yeah, this one I really liked, going back and kind of looking at everything that I've done and opportunities that's been presented to me. One that really stood out to me was about 10 years ago when I was asked to take on the BC technology industry leader role. So maybe I'll just detour a little bit. So in professional services, we are very project based. A client engages you for something, you start the project, you deliver the work, you have the deliverables, you move on to the next project. This leadership role that it was presented to me was really like taking me out of that day-to-day project lifestyle and saying, okay, well, you are now a leader in the firm. It is part of your job to work on strategy, broader team building, connection between the firm and the industry. And this would be companies in technology, media, and telecommunication space. like, what do we really want to be known for? How do we want to show up with people in those organizations and within that ecosystem? And that was an amazing learning opportunity, because it forced me to really think strategically, think about how do you get stuff done within an organization, how do you overcome hurdles or things like that there might be in achieving the goal, like and then also working with, like, what is that stretch goal? I know sometimes that's a very uncomfortable place for some of us to be, especially if you've grown up in the IT audit space. Like, stretch goals is not my is not my happy place. But how do you kind of get out of that? Like, you may not know exactly what all the steps look like to get there, but this is what we want to be. This is our aspiration. So that was a really, really kind of pivotal point, because it set me up for kind of good leadership discussions, really taking that seat at the table, because now within the firm, we have leaders for each of the industries. So there's a government one, energy and resources, consumer business, and a bunch of other ones. So you're sitting at a table and like, well, what are you going to do, Erica? And you have to really take your spot and make the case for your industry. Why is this important? Why do we want these resources, marketing, investment, whatever the case may be? And that was, I think, that I learned so much through going through that. And I would even say, like, being the ISACA president, I had to learn a little bit of those things already. So being able to apply it in this forum was super good learning experience for me.
Fantastic. Good for you to take on that challenge. And yeah, it gets uncomfortable when you're used to kind of a certain framework of working and expectations, and suddenly that's shifted. That's uncomfortable. But yeah, it's when things get a little uncomfortable you learn the most. And
absolutely,
that's a good one. Lastly, there's lots of young listeners, lots of aspiring female leaders, hopefully listening to this. What advice do you have for young women who are wanting to get into leadership roles?
There's so much to say on this topic. I think for me, it's really owning your place, either in the room or on the project you're at, or so on. Like, nobody should make you feel like you don't belong. Like, we belong everywhere. So if you have that kind of voice in your head that might say, "Ooh, like, I'm not technical enough," I think we get that one often, like, "Oh, I'm not technical enough," or "I'm not this enough," or "not that enough." Like, just shut that down and really think of, like, okay, well, am I trying my best? Have I got good experience? Is there anything from the outside that is really telling me this, or is it my own kind of almost imposter syndrome that's telling me this? And if you can learn early on in your career to maybe shut down that voice, I think that will help a lot, because we don't want a lot of energy to be spent on, like, am I worthy to be here? Like, that's not the right question to ask. The right question is, like, what's the value that I'm adding here? What ideas do I have? How do I work with the people in the room? That's really what we want people to do, because those are productive questions to ask, and applying energy to those thoughts would get you a lot further than questioning yourself. That, I think, it takes a lot of us a long time to kind of get there. But so if you're a new grad or a young woman, then start focusing on that piece right away. And if you're thinking, what is she talking about? I don't have that. Awesome. Then it means we've made a lot of progress.
That is the best advice I think I've heard. I think you're right. A lot of us take a long time to learn that. If you can get that off the get-go, you are so many steps ahead. So fantastic advice, Erica. Thank you so much for joining us today. You've provided great insights. I love the stories that you shared. And I hope our listeners enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.